My most vivid memory of the late 90s was the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Not because of the scandal itself, but because of the coverage of it. I remember my parents were pissed off at Clinton and kept calling him the deadbeat president. I couldn't watch any TV because they had the news running non-stop. We lived in Maryland, and my dad knew somebody who knew President Clinton personally. So they were getting details about what was going on behind the scenes. To clarify, my dad worked for the Department of Defense at the time, and Clinton being removed from office would have resulted in some kind of power shift, and his direct superior being promoted. What did I care? I was just a kid. I just wanted to watch Rocko's Modern Life. I remember my parents inviting over about 10 people, and while they had loud conversations downstairs as the TV was playing, I was up in my room, being a bitter kid. My parents wouldn't let me take the smaller black and white TV out of the closet. They couldn't get it to tune into the channel I wanted to watch anyway. I was sitting in my bed, listening to one of my cassette tapes, trying to drown out the annoying, serious adult conversation taking place downstairs. When I happened to glance out the window, down in the backyard, I saw a man I didn't recognize move across the yard quickly in the dark, avoiding the patches of light cast by the downstairs windows. I got out of bed and looked out my window at him. I remember that he was bald and very tall, taller than my dad. But I figured that he was just one of the guests that were visiting. Who cares about what he was doing in our backyard? I watched him more out of boredom than anything else. The man cautiously came closer to the house, peering into the ground floor windows. I was about to go back over to my dresser and flip my cassette tape over, when the man tossed something about the size of a video cassette into the doghouse. Now, our dog Gemini had just died a few weeks before. I didn't like this strange man touching the doghouse for any reason. So like the obnoxious kid I was, I walked out onto the landing and called out to my parents below. The tone of my voice left no doubt that I was unhappy and wanted the situation resolved immediately. I remember the silence that followed lasted way longer for my liking. "What man?" my mother called back up to me. From down below, all became quiet. All I could hear was the TV. To this day, I have never seen my dad move so fast. He shot up the stairs, picked me up, and came back down. My mom and the other house guests followed. We all had to wait at the neighbor's house across the street while the police and the bomb squad came. I don't think I realized the severity of the situation until I was much older, but at the time I was more annoyed than afraid. I was asked to share everything that I saw, but the only way I could describe the man was saying that he looked like Captain Picard. I wasn't the best at descriptions. I don't remember most of what happened next. We eventually got to go back into our house. My dad died of blood poisoning in 2005, and my mom passed away of natural causes in 2007. They never told me exactly what the package was, whether it was a bomb or a threat of any kind, but it was definitely something serious. The police would come back and show me pictures of possible suspects. I don't remember ever identifying the stranger in our backyard. I live in Vermont now, and I really have no ties to the people that my parents knew, but I have a creepy story for the ages that always entertains at parties. I have a faint memory of being involved in the Rodney King riots back in 1992. I was only 7 at the time. We had originally been stacking empty beer cans in my friend's fenced-in backyard when the commotion started. We heard a lot of yelling and cursing and police sirens, even a few loud pops, which I didn't understand at the time were gunshots. We all wandered over to the chain-link fence and watched the rioters up the street. They were shouting and breaking windows, getting into fights with cops and other random pedestrians. I have no recollection as to who was babysitting us that day, but needless to say, they did a piss-poor job. My friends and I actually left the enclosed yard and wandered out into the street to get a better look at the chaos, completely oblivious to the fact that what we were watching wasn't a show and one of those stray bullets could have easily killed us. We would watch 2 people fighting from a safe distance, then something else would catch our eye, becoming more and more separated from the backyard. One of my friends witnessed a shop being looted and asked us if we wanted any candy. He was a bit older, maybe 11. He crossed the street and peered through the broken glass. apprehensive about going inside because of all the infuriated adults around breaking things. I eventually got separated from all my friends. Most of the memory is a blur. I remember at one point getting scared when I realized that I didn't recognize anything. I ran into an alley and crouched down to watch. I remember seeing a cop take a corner pretty hard and flipped a man over the hood of his patrol car. A group of other men rushed the car before the cops could get out and started banging on the windows. In the alley across from me, I saw 3 or 4 other men pouring gasoline into a dumpster and lighting it on fire. I remember finding that fascinating, seeing a fire burning in something other than a fireplace or a ring of stones. I watched the fire grow bigger and bigger, completely oblivious to the world around me. I wanted to look closer, but I was too scared about crossing the street because there were so many people running around. I remember one woman walked past me down the alley. She came up to me and kissed me on the forehead and said, "God bless you, child. Get yourself home." Before I could even respond that I didn't know where home was, she was gone. She lit a cigarette and disappeared down the alley. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe only 20 minutes, maybe longer, but the dumpster fire was still raging, and I continued watching it. The next part stands out the clearest in my mind. A man in a green and white windbreaker turned the corner into the alley, saw me, and grabbed me by the shirt collar. He reeked of smoke, sweat, and gasoline. He might have been one of the men from before who started the fire. I'm not sure. He started dragging me across the road towards the dumpster fire. He was cursing and swearing at me, and I began to panic. I suddenly became afraid that he was going to toss me into the fire, as I could see the flames coming closer and closer. I wasn't sure if that's exactly where we were heading, or if we were just going in that direction, but I squealed and kicked in protest until he put me into a headlock and cut off my air. When we got to the far side of the street, I could feel the heat of the fire on my face. Suddenly, a bigger man grabbed the man holding me and threw him against the wall and punched him in the face. I remember staggering to the ground and watching in horror as the bigger man pressed my kidnapper's face to the side of the dumpster. The man screamed louder than I knew a human could scream. I remember the briefest smell of burning meat. I then took off running down the sidewalk. After that, it's mostly just blurry. I remember tripping and falling, and another woman picking me up and telling me to go into the church and sit down. I must have sat there in the pews until someone recognized me and brought me home. I really don't remember the details. Remarkably, I was mostly unharmed, aside from a few scrape marks. One of my friends had to be rushed to the hospital after someone had thrown a TV out of a high window, and some of the glass hit him in the face when the TV hit the sidewalk, but he turned out to be okay. I don't know if that bigger man was coming to save me, or just had beef with the man who grabbed me, but I often wonder what happened to the man in the windbreaker. I wonder if that bigger guy killed him after pressing his face to the side of that scalding hot dumpster. Seeing fire calls that memory back. I could be watching a movie and see a bonfire in the background, and that scream will echo in my head. Considering what could have happened to me, I think I got off lucky. My aunt had a near-death experience back in 1996. She and a friend had gone out to the bar one Friday night determined to each find a guy to bring home. They both were single and daring at the time, and wanted to try something adventurous. Since this was the 90s, they didn't have cell phones so that they could text each other. So they both came up with visual cues to look out for. If they removed their earrings, that meant they had found a guy that they liked, and if they held their hand to the back of their neck in a casual manner, that meant, "Come save me." Before it was common to have conversations with one eye on your phone, this was how people got themselves out of awkward situations. My aunt told me how she mingled with the crowd for a bit and let a few guys buy her some drinks, before zeroing in on a man who was eyeballing her from across the bar. He gave her a wink, but didn't come over to buy her a drink. She was intrigued by his interest. She crossed the bar and went over to him. She told me that he had a biker jacket on with a gold watch that had a leather band. She remembered that detail because her boss had wore the exact same type of watch, and she used it to break the ice. They danced for a few minutes, and upon heading back to the bar, she removed her earrings, deciding that this was the guy she wanted to spend the night with. He said his name was Harrison. They got a table in the corner and she let him buy her a drink. After a while, she lost track of time. She began to feel a bit sluggish and nauseous. She decided that she had overdone it with the cocktails. She glanced around the bar but couldn't find her friend anywhere. Feeling shaky on her legs, she excused herself to the restroom, hoping that was where her friend was, but no such luck. She left the bathroom and headed straight for the door, suddenly not feeling up to having company over. She began to hail a cab when Harrison came out of the bar and asked her if she needed a ride home. She had hoped to slip away, afraid she may be sick and make a fool of herself, but she decided to risk it for the sake of getting a ride home and possibly getting his phone number. On the route home, she was feeling a bit better, and she started getting flirty with him. When they parked in her driveway, she invited him in. They went through the front door, and my aunt dropped her keys on the stairs on the way to the living room. They made out on the couch for a few minutes, but suddenly my aunt felt sick to her stomach, and she apologized and told him that he had to go. She said he was very understanding, and hoped that she would feel better soon. They made plans to meet the next Friday night at the same bar. Harrison let himself out and my aunt locked the door behind him. Feeling disappointed and gross, she went to bed but couldn't fall asleep because her head wouldn't stop spinning. Just past midnight, she heard movement from downstairs. She sat up in bed and listened closely. She knew her parents were both still out of state. She had spoken to them on the phone before she left that night. No one else had the key to her house. So for a few moments, she sat frozen, uncertain if she was hearing what she thought she was. Then the noises came again. Not soft noises, like someone trying to be stealthy. It sounded more like someone was rummaging around downstairs. My aunt locked her bedroom door and pressed her ear to the ground. She heard down below cabinets being opened and shut. She grabbed the phone from her room and called the police, and then hid in her closet. In retrospect, she laughs at the absurdity of her situation. Her phone was not wireless, so anyone who broke into her room would see the phone cord leading right to her closet. When the operator came online, my aunt started talking a mile a minute, saying that she was sure that there was someone in her house. The operator kept her on the line, and the next 15 minutes felt like 6 hours. During a pause in the conversation, my aunt heard footsteps coming up the stairs, followed by doors squeaking as someone peeked in each room. She then went dead silent as she heard someone pause outside her bedroom door. She didn't even notice the sirens outside until they were in her driveway. The following few minutes were a complete nightmare as she wondered why the cops weren't making entry into the house. The operator informed her that the police were just outside, but couldn't find any indication of a break-in. In a panic, she instructed them to break down the door. Almost immediately, there was a commotion on the stairs, and my aunt heard several voices screaming for someone to get down on the ground. After another moment, my aunt crawled out of the closet and went beside the bedroom door until a police officer knocked and told her it was okay to come out. My aunt wrapped herself in a long coat and followed the officer down the stairs and outside the front door. But before she reached it, she glanced over into the living room and saw the plastic shower curtain from her downstairs bathroom spread out across the floor, and her father's open toolbox was lying on the ground next to it, along with a couple of knives from the kitchen. She started hyperventilating, and they had to call an ambulance for her. After she recovered, the police let her look at the suspect through the squad car's tinted windows, and she recognized Harrison immediately. It turns out when he left her house, he grabbed her keys off the stairs and came back later and let himself in. The paramedics reported finding drugs in her system, and it was concluded that he had drugged her at the bar, but perhaps had used the wrong amount because it hadn't knocked her out as quickly or as deeply as he had intended. Harrison turned out to be a fake name, and what was the most strange about him, according to the police, was that he had no criminal record at all. He later died in prison from leukemia. Today, my aunt shares the story willingly every time she's asked about it. There's even a running joke in our family not to buy her plastic shower curtains.
reason.